Okay, so this guy is from the USGS, and you'll hear him talking about the new Madrid earthquakes of 1811, 1812. And he is going to talk a little bit about the magnitude of it and how it was changing the geography. But what I find most interesting is what he says afterwards about the dearth of information, which is the lack of information that he could find about really anything, and how the way it was at the time, it seems like there was really nothing going on west of there, which I find quite interesting. And just the absolute lack of information, and this idea that settlers could go and put a log cabin down, and wherever that log cabin is becomes a grand city like Little Rock, Arkansas, or Cape Girardeau, Missouri. It's just a little tiny little log cabin that's rattling around in the earthquakes that becomes St. Louis, Missouri, in the future, or something. It's just crazy that way. I find it hard to believe. And then at the same time, established areas, it sounds like established areas would be turned into swamps afterwards. So have a listen here.
The sheer scale of it is such. For instance, the map back of me here shows Reelfoot Lake done around 1820, and you'll notice the northwestern corner of Tennessee, basically along the river, is been turned into a swamp or wetland or lake or all of the above due to the force of the earthquakes. In East Arkansas, it was transformed from an area that was of some utility, according to contemporary accounts, to being a wetland that wasn't drained until the 20th century. The scale of that kind of damage is very hard to imagine, even in the modern era. This was a totally new experience for everybody involved. And it's one reason they recorded it. It was because basically it was such a new experience that they thought, I shall write this down, one, so I can remember it, and so that I have a written record so somebody may believe me.
Why don't people do that more? It's just funny how you'll hear them talk about it, how there's just nothing much found like that. And also, I find it interesting how the evidence is very telling of the disaster, and so that is allowed to be in the history books. But then I never really heard of it much until the internet.
Even if it's a log cabin in the wilderness, where that log cabin in the wilderness was is now probably a major city. If you have some idea where that log cabin in that wilderness was it on a hill, was it on alluvial soil, what kind of ground it was on, that helps. You get some idea what the ground effect was at that from a New Madrid earthquake because it was written down at the time. However, historic records being what they are, they're not perfect and they're not complete.
So here we go. And did you see the little wry grin that he had when he said, he said about, it was just where that little log cabin was is now a major city. And it's just, it's laughable.
Where that log cabin in the wilderness was is now probably a major city.
It's truly laughable. I always go back to Chicago, like looking back, and you look at what Chicago was supposed to be in that one drawing that they have of Chicago in 1810. It's just a couple of scrabbly old log cabins and maybe a little fort. And then it switched to what it is today. Yeah, all that was built up. Yeah, right.
There are big swaths of the United States where I'd dearly love to have information that I've not been able to find anything yet. Where, due to later events or events during later wars or whatever, any human activity, records have been scattered or obscured to the point that they're not coming easy to find, so to speak. They're not revealing themselves willingly. And those you have to literally do detective work to find them again and backtrack what went on in that area to see where the records possibly have been deposited.
So it's just hard. It's just hard for him, you know? So, yeah, it's something that is a major issue. It's a major issue. Okay, so this is a quick one. This is just straight out of Google Earth. Just one of those photos that they have for Antarctica. And they're trying to show you, okay, well, this is Antarctica. Now, I looked at this and I thought, well, there are a couple things that I noticed that interested me. The first is the photos from this region. Well, first of all, I did a video already about this where none of the pictures are at nighttime in Antarctica. And they say, well, that's because when the people are there, it's 24 hours or close to that of daylight. And that may be, but you'd still have some people interested in seeing the stars down there, but they had no photos. All the photos on Google Earth during the day, all of them, like 1,000 photos. There was one area I found. It was one of these areas called Dome, I think. But I found the pictures there a little different, a little interesting. So what I notice about these pictures in Antarctica is they tend to have an unusual horizon, meaning it's like airbrushed, or it seems to approach. Like when you zoom in, it's like a wall. And so I was zooming in, and it seems like it comes in from right to left, so it gets closer and closer. The clouds something seems off about this white haze, but I was noticing when I was looking at it, I always look for the shadows because the shadows will point probably towards wherever the dome is. So there you see some mountains in the distance, and then you don't over here. It just goes to that. And so I started seeing artifacts, and I just don't see anything in the distant horizon. And I started to notice, well, it kind of looks fake-ish here. And then I saw a seam here, and so it's like, okay, well, maybe it's stitched together, okay, from like a composite, like putting two photos together. Maybe. But this seems really a lot in the foreground, and the shadowing. I don't know, what do you think? Because there is a lot from, like, the Truman Show here. Yeah, this one's very much like that. Oops. Let's go back. Yeah, see how it's just kind of cut off there. It's like, what is there? Did they have to, like, draw in something? It just doesn't look right. It's definitely manipulated. So it's not just Google Earth itself, but the photos within Google Earth. Oh, it's a mountain landscape. Just someone snapped a photo. Why can't they just snap a photo? Because if it was that easy, that's what you would have. But then you find this on Google Earth. Why would you find this? If it's just, they just snap a photo out of a plane or whatever, then snap a photo. What's this? Why are they showing us this? Why is this getting put on Google Earth? We're not allowed to go there. So just snap a photo for us, guys. No. Oh, look here. And then they put a face in there. See that? They put a face in there. They're what's really there, you know. Oh, my. Okay. I was researching Tatarian cultural relics, things like that, and I came across this, and it correlates to something else, which is ancient Egyptian, and I'll show you that in a minute. But this is it says it's a Mongol, and I'm thinking these Mongols, they really push this idea that they just are tent dwellers who knew nothing, couldn't do anything. They're just from Siberia with their goat. They milk their goats, and they whack sticks around in mud, and maybe they'll throw some stones at you if you get close, or if you make friends, they can start a little fire with little dung cakes and make you some shitty-ass tea to drink or something like that. And I'm thinking, no, these guys, there's so much more tech and there's so much more knowledge out there. Probably the more contemporary and mainstream something is, the crappier it is in a lot of ways. So here, I figure there's going to be some artwork out there that shows some stuff that is like, holy shit, what is that? Because that seems like high tech. So here you have this guy with this like kind of weird looking camel. I'm not sure, do their legs bend that way? But here he is, and he's astounded by something. He comes across something. And is that a cloak draped over the saddle there? I don't know. But he's just traveling, passing through, and he sees this thing. And so, okay, let's just read it. They're talking about the fashion styles, and in one mural, A camel is being led by a man who's wearing a soft hat. How can you tell it's soft? With 4 edges, I guess, which was the traditional hat of northern nomadic tribes from ancient times. The archaeologists wrote in the journal article, Mongol rulers issued a dress code in 1314 for racial segregation. Racists. Han Solo Chinese officials maintained the round collar shirts and folded hats, and the Mongolian officials wore clothes like long jackets and soft hats with 4 edges, they wrote. The person leading the camel in this mural can be seen wearing a soft hat with 4 edges, which archaeologists note is a design worn by the Mongols. So they already knew it. So they're saying of note is his hat, which is the same as what they think they already know, and it's for racism. Okay, thanks, guys. You go back and do your peer review, circle jerk peer reviews, mutual admiration society stuff. I'm going to look at this object that the guy's astounded by, and the camel is taken slightly aback by. The camel is maybe it's bending its legs the wrong way. I don't know if their legs bend that way, but anyway, he's squat, and the camel is like, holy crap, what is this thing? Maybe it's making some noise or something, I don't know. But this guy, his legs falling off, his knees are knocking apart, and he's kind of jumping back because this, Jack jumped over, or whatever, jumped over the candlestick, whatever, nursery rhyme. Maybe that's the candlestick. I don't know. What's the disc spinny thing? And is that flame coming out of the top? The bottom kind of looks like a oil basin. What's holding up that disc? Is it spinning? Does it tell you something? What is this thing? So I'll show you something else. It's interesting to me how they just overlook that. Oh, well, whatever, they didn't scratch it out because the drawing shows it's in the frame and he's looking at it. I guess maybe they scratched some of it out, but what is it? What is it he's looking at? Well, it doesn't really say. But it looks familiar. Here's something from one of the World's Fairs. It's basically a lamp. Now, this Egyptian thing, I mentioned Egyptian, and I didn't mean this. This is what a lot of people are familiar with, but this is not what I meant. I meant this, where this is more like a lamp thing they're showing, and there's a diagram on each side of it, but you can see the glowing ball. There's the Ankh, the Egyptian symbol of life, kind of embedded in that, but again, does that have to do, it's a little similar to the symbol for Mercury, but the technology that they had, the Vimanas pictured numerous places. You could say, oh, it's just allegorical. But this was unearthed in Italy recently. It was excavated, and there were photos of it before it got retouched and all that type of stuff. That's worth a separate video. But I think these little clues that they have here of these water bearers, that shows that there was a lot of technology. Now, people are familiar with the batteries. Okay, that's old news. But I think it's way beyond that. If you look at these stoves, are they coal stoves? Well, that's what they get used for that we know of. But at one point, they were something else. See that symbol? Where's that come from? What's that mean? That's nuclear. And you look at this, well, that's not an air flue exactly. It's symbolizing radium. And here you can see radium. I may even say it is only a luxury because they got rid of it. Okay, breaking back into my video here, as I was doing my final edit, I noticed the name of the man saying, I may even say it is only a luxury. His name, look at it. It's all initials. EBT. Isn't that like food stamps? Is that only a luxury? Is that originally, how far does all this planning and stuff go? Why did they call it EBT? And it's from the government. And is it a luxury? It's literally like food to survive or whatever. So anybody relying on that, is this like predictive programming? It's only a luxury. Because everything that they give you, the government, they reserve the right, and they probably plan at some point to take it away, especially if you're a bad slave or whatever, for them. And so radium, it would only have been the government that takes it away, I think. If they had freedom, it'd still be around. It's not a luxury. It's how the homes and fireplaces and things were constructed. It was for the radiant heat from radioactive materials, which are not as harmful as we are led to believe. The technology that they had could melt great structures. You can see in that painting by John Martin. Now this is an example of some of these towers that are they lookout towers, are they water towers, are they decorative monuments? Well, we know this from the Global Vision video. He showed very well these are definitely lamps. They're made with mercury amalgams. They're on the top of so many buildings, and they illuminate. They used to. They've been mineralized with great age, probably from being submerged in a worldwide flood. Here in the 1700s, they had this illumination demonstration. So, okay, back to this. We see these people holding these things, and you kind of look around, it's like, oh, they're flying. Oh, it's just allegorical stuff or whatever. No, maybe they're flying. Like, it may seem crazy to you now, but maybe this is just a depiction of what they did. Here again, you have I think it's an octagon there. So it's part of the power generation and travel. Those things are always like satellite power stations to these buildings, the big, huge ones, nearby cathedrals and stuff like that. You find these types of like octagonal things, and here's one of these massive, awesome domes, and they lit that stuff up, boy. They didn't have those dark streets like that. And so what post was he looking at? Well, here you say the norms are doubled to form the octagon. The octagonal monument in the center was originally erected in the mid-19th century, 1850s, in memory of a wealthy local. Yeah, right. A decade or so ahead of the first date in our catalog's 1865 to 1914 range. Of course, everything begins in 1850, not before. We wondered whether we could refine the date range for this Lawrence French shot. The statue still had a head and appeared unaffected by damage that Beachcomber, Austria, noted confirmed that the image likely didn't exceed the late 1910s. However, our eagle-eyed sleuths were able to refine further. Sharon Corbett was quick to point out that the distant spire put the earliest date in the 1870s. Our MacPro suggests the electric lights might imply an early 20th century date, and this seems to have been confirmed by a 1902 date in the graffiti spotted by Beachcomber, Australia, and corroborated by Nilau Macaulay and Derange Delmure. Ultimately, through the community's efforts, we have learned the monument did succumb to various attempts, and the original statue of George Glendenning, 1770-1843, was replaced, of course, by one of St. Patrick in the late 20th century. Photographer French, Robert French, 1841 to 1917, okay. So the electric lights, they say, oh, well, see, they fit it in. They say, well, electric lights wouldn't have been around till about 1900, maybe a little before. But they say, oh, well, then it has to be 1902. It's confirmed because a little graffiti will tell you. So you can spray some graffiti on, and then the technology has to meet the date of the graffiti, not the other way around. Doesn't really make sense to me, but okay.